stop talking. Right now, you're destroying yourself with your own words. You think communication builds connections. You think honesty builds trust. You think speaking your mind builds respect. Sometimes, yes. But more often, your mouth is your worst enemy. Every day, people sabotage themselves not through their actions, but through their words. They say too much, reveal too much, promise too much, explain too much, and they pay for it. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something most people never learn. Silence is power. Words are weapons that often wound the speaker more than the target. The strategic person knows when to speak and when to stay silent. The foolish person speaks constantly and wonders why they keep losing. Your mouth betrays you in 10 specific situations. Each one is a trap. Each one feels safe in the moment. Each one destroys you later. Today, you'll learn to recognize these 10 situations and master the discipline of strategic silence. You will understand why the most powerful people speak the least and why the weakest people can't stop talking. This isn't about being fake or dishonest. This is about understanding that not every thought deserves voice and not every question deserves answer. Before we unlock these 10 situations, let me be absolutely clear. Strategic silence isn't about lying or deception. It's about discretion. It's about protecting yourself from self-sabotage. It's about understanding that some information serves you better unspoken. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is my power. Before we continue, if you've ever said something you immediately regretted, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. And tell me in the comments, what's one situation where your own mouth betrayed you? What did you say that you shouldn't have? Share it below because recognizing these patterns is how you stop repeating them. Now let's identify the 10 situations where your mouth becomes your enemy. Situation 1. When someone asks what you really think. This feels like an invitation to honesty. It's actually a trap. When someone asks what you really think, especially about them, their work, or their ideas, they're rarely seeking truth. They're seeking validation. Your honest criticism, no matter how constructive, will damage the relationship. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." People see your criticism, but they don't feel your good intentions behind it. Here's what happens when you give honest criticism they requested. Your boss asks what you really think about their new strategy. You honestly explain the flaws you see. You think you're being helpful. They hear that you don't support them. They remember your criticism when promotion time comes. You didn't build trust through honesty. You built suspicion through criticism. A friend asks what you really think about their relationship. You honestly share your concerns about red flags you see. You think you're being a good friend. They defend their partner and distance themselves from you. When the relationship inevitably fails, they don't thank you for warning them. They remember that you didn't support them. You didn't help through honesty. You damaged friendship through unwanted truth. A colleague asks what you really think about their work. You honestly point out areas for improvement. You think you're helping them grow. They hear that you think they're incompetent. They become defensive and possibly hostile. You didn't build collaboration through honesty. You created an enemy through criticism. The pattern is clear. When people ask what you really think, they want affirmation, not criticism. Your honest critique, even when requested, betrays you by damaging relationships. Here's what to say instead. When asked what you really think, find something genuinely positive to emphasize and minimize or deflect from negatives. I think you're really onto something with X aspect. Focuses on positive while avoiding the negatives. I'm not sure I'm the best person to evaluate that. Removes you from giving unwanted criticism. What do you think about it? Returns the question, forcing them to answer their own question. The key is never giving harsh honesty when someone asks what you really think, unless you're certain they can handle it and your relationship is strong enough to survive it. Most of the time, both conditions are false. Your mouth betrays you when it mistakes requests for honesty as actual desire for brutal truth. Situation 2. When you're explaining why you failed. This feels like taking responsibility. It's actually making excuses. When you fail at something, Your instinct is to explain all the reasons why. The circumstances, the challenges, the unfairness. Every word of explanation sounds like excuse to others. Machiavelli understood that explaining failure draws attention to it and makes you look weak. Powerful people acknowledge failure briefly and move immediately to what's next. Here's what happens when you over-explain failure. You miss a deadline and spend 10 minutes explaining all the obstacles you faced. You think you're providing context. Others hear excuses. Even if everything you say is true, it sounds like you're avoiding responsibility. Your explanation betrays you by making you look defensive and weak. You lose a client and explain in detail all the reasons that weren't your fault. You think you're protecting your reputation. Others hear that you make excuses instead of owning outcomes. Your explanation betrays you by making you look like someone who doesn't take responsibility. You fail to hit a target and enumerate all the unfair advantages others had. You think you're explaining context. Others hear that you can't perform under normal business conditions where others have advantages. Your explanation betrays you by making you look incompetent rather than unlucky. The pattern is clear. Explaining failure amplifies it and makes you look worse than simply acknowledging it and moving on. Here's what to say instead. When you fail, acknowledge it briefly and move immediately to corrective action. That didn't work out. Here's what I'm doing differently next time. This shows ownership and forward focus. I missed that target. I'm already implementing X to prevent recurrence. This demonstrates accountability and problem solving. The entire acknowledgement should take 10 seconds maximum. Then change the subject. Your mouth betrays you when it thinks explaining failure minimizes it. Actually, explaining failure amplifies it. Brief acknowledgement and quick pivot to action demonstrate strength. Situation 3. When you're sharing your plans too early. This feels like building support and accountability. It's actually inviting sabotage and creating pressure. When you share plans before executing, you give others opportunity to discourage you, copy you, or undermine you. You also create social pressure that often paralyzes execution. Machiavelli warned never to announce intentions before acting. Execute first, announce after. Here's what happens when you share plans prematurely. You tell everyone you're starting a business. Some people discourage you, planting doubts. Others might copy your idea. You feel pressure from everyone watching and waiting. This pressure often prevents you from starting at all. Your announcement betrayed you by creating obstacles where none existed. You tell your team you're considering a major change before deciding. They resist immediately, creating political pressure against it. Even if it's the right decision, you've now made it harder to implement. Your premature sharing betrayed you by organizing opposition before you'd committed. Here's what happens when you over-explain failure. You miss a deadline and spend 10 minutes explaining all the obstacles you faced. You think you're providing context. Others hear excuses. Even if everything you say is true, it sounds like you're avoiding responsibility. Your explanation betrays you by making you look defensive and weak. You lose a client and explain in detail all the reasons that weren't your fault. You think you're protecting your reputation. Others hear that you make excuses instead of owning outcomes. Your explanation betrays you by making you look like someone who doesn't take responsibility. You fail to hit a target and enumerate all the unfair advantages others had. You think you're explaining context. Others hear that you can't perform under normal business conditions where others have advantages. Your explanation betrays you by making you look incompetent rather than unlucky. The pattern is clear. Explaining failure amplifies it and makes you look worse than simply acknowledging it and moving on. Here's what to say instead. When you fail, acknowledge it briefly and move immediately to corrective action. That didn't work out. Here's what I'm doing differently next time. This shows ownership and forward focus. I missed that target. I'm already implementing X to prevent recurrence. This demonstrates accountability and problem solving. The entire acknowledgement should take 10 seconds maximum. Then change the subject. Your mouth betrays you when it thinks explaining failure minimizes it. Actually, explaining failure amplifies it. Brief acknowledgement and quick pivot to action demonstrate strength. Situation 3. When you're sharing your plans too early. This feels like building support and accountability. It's actually inviting sabotage and creating pressure. When you share plans before executing, you give others opportunity to discourage you, copy you, or undermine you. You also create social pressure that often paralyzes execution. Machiavelli warned never to announce intentions before acting. Execute first, announce after. Here's what happens when you share plans prematurely. You tell everyone you're starting a business. Some people discourage you, planting doubts. Others might copy your idea. You feel pressure from everyone watching and waiting. This pressure often prevents you from starting at all. Your announcement betrayed you by creating obstacles where none existed. You tell your team you're considering a major change before deciding. They resist immediately, creating political pressure against it. Even if it's the right decision, you've now made it harder to implement. Your premature sharing betrayed you by organizing opposition before you'd committed. You tell your network you're looking for a new job before securing one. Your current employer might hear about it and move against you. Your desperation becomes known, weakening your negotiating position. Your premature disclosure betrayed you by creating risk and reducing leverage. The pattern is clear. Sharing plans before execution invites problems. Execution first, announcement after, maintains power. Here's what to say instead. When people ask what you're working on, stay vague until it's done. I'm exploring a few things, nothing definite yet. This answers without revealing. I'll share more when there's something concrete to share. This deflects without being rude. The key is keeping plans private until they're far enough along that opposition can't stop them, or until they're complete and opposition is irrelevant. Your mouth betrays you when it announces plans that should stay private until execution is underway. Situation 4. When you're revealing your limits. This feels like being honest about boundaries. It's actually showing others exactly how to beat you. When you tell people your limits, your weaknesses, your constraints, you're handing them a roadmap to exploit you. Machiavelli understood that revealing limits invites others to push you to them. Concealing limits maintains unpredictability and power. Here's what happens when you reveal your limits. In negotiation, you reveal your maximum price. The other side now knows they can push you to that limit and you'll accept. Your honesty betrayed you by eliminating all bargaining power above your stated maximum. You tell someone your deadline and that it's flexible. They now know they can push that deadline and you'll accommodate. Your transparency betrayed you by inviting them to take advantage of your flexibility. You explain that you're conflict averse and prefer harmony. People now know they can pressure you with conflict and you'll back down. Your vulnerability betrayed you by advertising your exploitable weakness. The pattern is clear. Revealing limits invites others to push you to them. Concealing limits maintains negotiating room and unpredictability. Here's what to say instead. When asked about limits, stay vague or suggest firmer boundaries than actually exist. I need to see the full package before discussing price avoids revealing maximum. This timeline is tight, suggests inflexibility without revealing actual flexibility. I'm comfortable with difficult conversations, conceals conflict aversion, even if you prefer harmony. The key is never giving others the precise information they need to exploit you. Your mouth betrays you when it reveals the exact limits others can push you to. Situation 5. When you're defending yourself against accusations. This feels like protecting your reputation. It's actually making the accusation seem credible. When someone accuses you of something and you immediately launch into detailed defense, you look guilty. Innocent people often don't bother defending themselves against absurd accusations. Machiavelli understood that vigorous defense validates the accusation. Strategic silence or minimal response often works better. Here's what happens when you over-defend. Someone accuses you of being difficult to work with. You spend 20 minutes explaining why you're not difficult and listing everyone who likes you. Your vigorous defense makes people think maybe they are difficult. Your defense betrayed you by making the accusation seem credible enough to require extensive rebuttal. Someone suggests you're not qualified. You immediately list all your qualifications defensively. Your defensive response makes people think maybe they're not qualified. Your defense betrayed you by appearing insecure rather than confident. Someone claims you made a mistake. You extensively explain why it wasn't a mistake with defensive energy. Your defensiveness makes people think maybe it was a mistake. Your defense betrayed you by looking guilty rather than wrongly accused. The pattern is clear. Extensive defense against accusations often makes them seem more credible. Minimal response or confident dismissal often works better. Here's what to say instead. Against false accusations, respond minimally and confidently. That's not accurate, and move on. I'm comfortable with my record without elaborating. Anyone who's worked with me knows otherwise, without listing examples. The key is brief, confident dismissal without the defensive energy that makes accusations seem legitimate. Your mouth betrays you when it thinks extensive defense proves innocence. Often, extensive defense suggests guilt. Situation 6. When you're complaining about others. This feels like venting and building alliances. It's actually creating distrust and making you look negative. When you complain about others, even if everything you say is true, the person you're complaining to makes a logical assumption. If you talk about others behind their back, you probably talk about them behind their back too. Machiavelli understood that gossip and complaint create distrust in the listener, not alliance. Here's what happens when you complain about others. You complain to colleague A about colleague B. Colleague A sympathetically agrees, but colleague A now knows you talk negatively about people who aren't present. They assume you do the same about them. Your complaint betrayed you by making colleague A distrust you. You vent to your friend about your boss. Your friend listens supportively, but your friend now sees you as someone who complains about authority figures. They assume you'd complain about them too if they were in authority. Your venting betrayed you by reducing their respect for you. You criticize a mutual friend to another friend. They agree with your criticism, but they now know you criticize mutual friends behind their backs. They assume you criticize them behind their back too. Your criticism betrayed you by damaging trust even as the listener agreed. The pattern is clear. Complaining about others makes listeners distrust you because they assume you treat everyone the same way. Here's what to say instead. When you're frustrated with someone, either address it with them directly or say nothing. If someone tries to engage you in gossip or complaint, deflect. I'd rather not discuss them when they're not here. That's between them and me. I try not to talk about people behind their backs. The key is maintaining the reputation as someone who doesn't gossip or complain about others. This builds trust because people know you won't do it about them either. Your mouth betrays you when it thinks complaining builds alliances. Actually complaining destroys trust. Situation 7. When you're filling silence. This feels like being polite and maintaining conversation. It's actually revealing information unnecessarily. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence in conversations. They fill every gap with words. This compulsion to fill silence makes them reveal information that serves others more than themselves. Machiavelli understood that comfortable silence is power. The person who can tolerate silence controls the conversation. Here's what happens when you fill silence unnecessarily. In negotiation, you make an offer, and silence follows. Uncomfortable with the silence, you immediately start explaining, justifying, or even reducing your offer. Your discomfort with silence betrayed you by making you negotiate against yourself. Someone asks you a difficult question. You answer, then silence. Unable to tolerate it, you keep talking, adding details and qualifications that weaken your answer. Your need to fill silence betrayed you by over-explaining. You're in a meeting, and silence falls. Uncomfortable, you speak just to fill the void, often saying something you haven't thought through. Your compulsion to fill silence betrayed you by making you speak without strategic purpose. The pattern is clear. Filling silence unnecessarily makes you give away power, information, and advantage. Here's what to do instead. Practice sitting in silence. After you speak, stop and let silence exist. Don't fill it. Wait for others to speak. This is deeply uncomfortable at first, but it's incredibly powerful. In negotiations, make your offer and then stay completely silent, even if the silence lasts minutes. In conversations, answer questions and then stop, even if silence follows. In meetings, let silence exist instead of speaking just to fill it. The key is becoming comfortable with silence. The person who can tolerate silence longest controls the dynamic. Your mouth betrays you when it fills silence that would serve you better empty. Situation 8. When you're sharing personal struggles. This feels like building authentic connections. It's actually creating perceived weakness. Vulnerability has its place in close personal relationships, but in professional contexts or competitive environments, sharing your struggles often damages how others perceive your capability. Machiavelli understood that appearing strong matters more than being authentic about struggles. Here's what happens when you overshare struggles. You tell your boss you're struggling with the workload. You think you're being honest about capacity. They hear that you can't handle your responsibilities. When promotion time comes, they remember you struggled where others seem to manage. Your honesty betrayed you by creating perception of incompetence. You tell a client you're having trouble with a project aspect. You think you're being transparent. They question your capability and might look elsewhere. Your transparency betrayed you by creating doubt where confidence would have served better. You share with colleagues that you're going through personal difficulties. You think you're building authentic connection. Some people use this information to undermine you or see you as less capable. Your vulnerability betrayed you by creating opportunities for exploitation. The pattern is clear. Sharing struggles often creates perception of weakness rather than authentic connection, especially in competitive or professional contexts. Here's what to say instead. Keep struggles private or share only with trusted close relationships. In professional contexts, project competence even when struggling internally. I'm managing well instead of I'm overwhelmed. Making good progress instead of really struggling with this. The key is distinguishing contexts. Vulnerability with close friends strengthens bonds. Vulnerability in competitive contexts creates perceived weakness. Your mouth betrays you when it shares struggles in contexts where strength matters more than authenticity. Here's what happens when you promise to please. Someone asks if you can help them with something. Wanting to be liked, you promise help even though you're not sure you'll have time. Later you can't deliver. They're disappointed and remember you as unreliable. Your promise betrayed you by creating obligation you couldn't meet. Someone asks if you can meet an aggressive deadline. Wanting to seem capable, you promise you can even though it's nearly impossible. You miss the deadline. They remember you failed, not that the deadline was unreasonable. Your promise betrayed you by setting expectation you couldn't meet. Someone asks if you agree with their plan. Wanting to avoid conflict, you promise support even though you have reservations. Later, when problems arise, they remember you supported the plan and share blame. Your promise betrayed you by creating complicity in something you didn't actually support. The pattern is clear. Promising to please others often leads to broken promises that damage reputation more than cautious non-promising. Here's what to say instead. When asked to promise things, stay non-committal until you're certain you can deliver. Let me check my capacity and get back to you, instead of immediately promising help. That's ambitious. Let me see what's realistic, instead of promising aggressive timelines. I have some concerns I'd want to discuss, instead of promising support you don't feel. The key is under-promising, and over-delivering beats over-promising and under-delivering. Your mouth betrays you when it makes promises to create momentary happiness that lead to future disappointment. Situation 10. When you're explaining your success. This feels like sharing your journey and being authentic about how you succeeded. It's actually diminishing your accomplishment and revealing your methods. When you explain exactly how you succeeded, you make it seem easier than it was and give others your playbook. Machiavelli understood that mystery about success maintains power. Full explanation diminishes it. Here's what happens when you over-explain success. You achieve something impressive and someone asks how you did it. You thoroughly explain every step, every advantage, every bit of luck involved. They now think, oh, I could do that too, it wasn't that special. Your explanation betrayed you by diminishing your accomplishment. You build something successful and competitors ask about your methods. Wanting to seem helpful and confident, you explain your approach. They copy your methods and compete with you more effectively. Your transparency betrayed you by arming competition. You accomplish something and explain all the resources and support you had. Trying to be humble, you make it clear you had advantages. People now discount your achievement as mainly luck or resources. Your humility betrayed you by reducing credit for your accomplishment. The pattern is clear. Over-explaining success diminishes it and sometimes creates competition. Maintaining some mystery about success keeps it impressive. Here's what to say instead. When asked about success, stay somewhat vague and emphasize the work without revealing all methods. A lot of hard work and learning, without detailing exactly what you learned. Right timing and preparation meeting opportunity, without explaining precisely how you prepared. Strong team and clear focus without revealing your specific strategies. The key is acknowledging success without teaching others how to replicate it or diminishing it through excessive explanation. Your mouth betrays you when it explains away the impressiveness of your achievements or teaches competitors your methods. You've just learned the 10 situations where your own mouth becomes your worst enemy. But here's what separates people who know these situations from people who avoid them: self-awareness and discipline. Most people recognize these patterns after the damage is done. I shouldn't have said that. Why did I tell them that? I talk too much. Recognition after betrayal doesn't prevent betrayal. Here's your action plan. For the next week, before speaking in any significant interaction, pause and ask yourself, will saying this serve me or betray me? That pause creates space between impulse and speech. In that space, wisdom lives. Practice this internal check. Am I explaining when I should acknowledge briefly? Am I sharing plans when I should execute silently? Am I revealing limits when I should stay vague? Am I defending excessively when I should dismiss confidently? Am I complaining when I should stay silent? Am I filling silence when I should embrace it? Am I sharing struggles when I should project strength? Am I promising to please when I should commit cautiously? Am I explaining success when I should maintain mystery? One pause before speaking, one internal check, prevents your mouth from betraying you. But remember this truth: strategic silence isn't about being fake or dishonest. It's about recognizing that not every thought deserves voice, not every question deserves complete answer, and not every silence deserves filling. The most powerful people in any room are often the quietest. They speak strategically, not compulsively. They share selectively, not universally. They reveal calculatedly, not automatically. That's the difference between people whose mouths serve them and people whose mouths betray them. One group controls their speech. The other group lets speech control them. Which are you? If this video revealed patterns where your mouth has betrayed you, hit that like button. If you want more lessons on strategic communication and power dynamics, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Drop a comment. Which of these 10 situations have you been guilty of? Which one do you need to work on most? Your honesty might help someone else recognize their own pattern. Until next time, remember Machiavelli's warning. Your mouth is a weapon. Make sure it's pointed at your enemies, not yourself. Master strategic silence. Control your speech. Let your words serve you instead of betraying you. Stay silent. Stay strategic. Stay powerful.